Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fifth and penultimate NaPoWriMo podcast. You may also call it the NaPodcast if you are one of the cool people. We are this week talking about sestinas. I am so incredibly excited. And this week I am joined by three fantabulous guests. So we have Mark, swift as a coursing river galley. We have Bex, all the force of a great typhoon Sherwood. We have Kevin, all the strength of a raging fire McLean. And I, of course, am your host, Katie, mysterious as the dark side of the moon ails. Welcome to the podcast.
Why are we doing Katie hosting two of these out of all the options we had?
I don't know. I'm kind of coming around to it. No, I'm kind of coming around to it. That was beautiful,
Embrace
Katie.
did
you write
chaos.
that just for us?
Did I write that? I did.
Did you write those just for us?
Yeah, it's fully original. It's fully original.
I want to see if she'd own up. I want to see if she'd take the credit.
So everyone, if you have not heard the NaPodcast before, welcome. We are four human beings who enjoy poetry. And we like to talk about it, and we like to challenge ourselves to write poems in various poetic forms. So this will be an hour of sharing poetry and talking about poetic form. If you have listened to the NaPodcast before or watched it before, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us on this writing journey throughout April. NaPoWriMo is National Poetry Writing Month, where a lot of people challenge themselves to write on a daily basis. We've sort of twisted it based on our Return to Form project, which we did earlier this year. And so we are writing in poetic form. So we've done concrete poetry. We did golden shovels.
Oh, how I miss concrete.
Oh,
I'm right.
Yeah, we started off easier. Yeah, so concrete poetry, then golden shovels, then Shakespearean sonnets, and we have reached the Sestina. Next week, we will be doing univocalisms, univocal poems. So that is still to look forward to. But yeah, Sestina week. How did everyone get on? Bex, you have a smile on your face. Did you have that smile on your face?
I always have a smile on my face. No, I did not have that while I was writing this poem. It was okay. It was really hard. I was expecting it to be really hard, and it was really hard. So in some ways it was exactly as I expected. But I knew pretty quickly that what my normal kind of like more jokey kind of like funny probably wasn't going to fit with this. So I kind of used that as an excuse to delve into some new poetic realms, swim through the Sestina waters.
I feel like you've done that a lot through NaPoWriMo, though. You sort of used form as an excuse to play with different style and content too, which is awesome to see from you. So
thanks.
Yeah.
Bex always swings in NaPoWriMo. It's because Bex runs NaPoWriMo. She thinks about it in advance like a normal human. And then it gets to us and we're like, oh, Sestina, right? Yeah. Like, it's brutal. Bex
having done a lot of publicity around these different kinds of forms, I do know them fairly well, but I've also had a lot of time to be like, how would I write something like that? And while that hasn't meant that I have actually written anything like that outside of NaPoWriMo, I have at least kind of vaguely considered it.
So you haven't done a Sestina yet, because you've done a lot of these forms like before, either like in the build up with cows and even before that and other things. So you hadn't done a Sestina before.
No, I had avoided the Sestina thus far, and had done what Kevin also done of just going, glad I don't have to write that. And then, this was the real one I really didn't want to do the most because it's long. It's a lot of lines.
We should, let's briefly explain what they are, and then we'll get into the poems. So, Kev, can you break down what a Sestina is for everyone?
So a sestina is a poem in which you select 6 words, and those 6 words in a sort of particular sequence become the end words of your lines. You have, I think it's 5 stanzas of 6 lines, and then
6.
6, sorry, that makes sense. 6 stanzas of 6 lines, and then an envoy of 3 lines, with the still with the repeating word sort of sequence. And it ends with like, one stanza ends with a word, say word 6. The next stanza will sort of begin with word 6 at the end line and stuff. So there's some particulars to it. Also, we were kind of doing, because this is what I discovered in my research when I panicked. Because before I went and watched the workshop on YouTube, the I Am Loud YouTube, the one from Katie, that was part of the Return to Form series. You can watch it. You click on the bubble. I went and sort of did some Googling. I was like, let's see some other sources. I shouldn't just watch our stuff. And when I looked up Sestinas, they were all talking about iambic pentameter, which I did not enjoy in when we did sonnets. And they were talking about like having to use those repeating words in the middle lines and things like that. And it seemed much more complicated. And then I watched your video where you just ditched all of that, and I was very relieved. So yeah.
I did make a decision up front when we were doing Return to Form, because the Sestina is an old poetic form. It came about sort of in the 1300s in France, and it's evolved quite a lot over the past 800 years. And traditionally they are written in meter, or at least sort of with specific syllabic counts per line. And I decided, look, we're doing a program on form.
Folks in ancient France had way more time on their hands. I've got YouTube videos to watch. I got like the beach to go with my nephew. We were allowed outside for once. Like, no time for your iambic whatevers. All right.
We totally should have seen that this was like an evil poem, because it's 6 stanzas of 6 lines and 6 end words. 666.
So that's the Sestina in a nutshell. They are a nightmare.
That's what it is in a nutshell.
They are really, really challenging to write. So I'm very excited to see how everyone got on, to hear everyone's poems. Mark, how are you feeling? How did this week go for you?
I feel a bit strange with this one, because this one actually seemed to not kick me as much as the rest of them. I had all of the iambic, and we abided by all these other weird and stringent rules, I probably would have been here with a middle finger rather than a poem. But weird, it was quite nice, because I took advice from you guys from the Golden Shovel week, and so like the end words and like the subject and stuff, I kind of based it on something I wasn't as bothered about. Well, not as bothered about, but I took an inspiration from it rather than like, oh my god, like the absolute tippity top of what I like. And then because I noticed the ones I was reading all tended to at least semi-lend to a narrative-ish. Like the narrative seems to move nicely with the Sestina. And I quite like narrative stuff. I've been working with that. And it wasn't until afterwards I discovered what this piece actually was, from the song base. But I actually found it quite fun, especially once I found out how many ways I could cheat. Like,
this has been a month of figuring out all of the various cheats to poetic form to make it easier.
Work smarter, not harder.
Oh, I feel that like both this and the sonnet, and I think the univocal will be the same, have forced me to use a much wider vocabulary than normal.
That is one reason I didn't like the Sestina as much, though, to be fair, because I really don't like repeating words in poems kind of at all. Like, unless it's, it's that fixed word, it's a description of something where you can't change it. I really like to vary it up. I don't like using the same ones. So having the same end words for this one was like, no, I've used it already. Was a bit stressful, but otherwise, yeah, not all so bad on my front. Strangely.
Good. So a mix of experiences. This is good. Before we get into sharing them, usually
I'm annoyed when anyone gets on well. I don't know what that's about. I felt myself shaking my head there in rage at Mark's ease with which he's tackled this. Good. That's good, buddy. I'm pleased. I should be pleased.
Yeah. It wasn't easy. It was easier than others. But yeah, that was just a nice surprise, because I thought this one was going to be really bad.
It has certainly been a month of going in with certain expectations and then finding certain forms much easier and other forms much harder than we had expected, which is, I think, really valuable, because often there's that sort of terror of going into a certain poetic form and going, this is going to be a nightmare. And it's great when it actually, works out in your favor. Normally at the start of the NaPodcast, we share out a poem from someone in the community who has been writing. This week, because we have a ton to talk about and because sestinas are really long, we're just going to go straight into our poems. But please do, if you don't already, follow us on social media. All of the links are below. We've been sharing tons of poems throughout this month, as well as tips and tricks and encouragement. So there is tons to check out there if you don't follow us already. But yeah, let's just start diving into the goodness of the sestina form. Bex, I'm gonna start with you again. Could you, give us a bit of background on how this went, and then perhaps share a poem?
Ooh, yes, I will share a poem because I've written one for the purposes of sharing it. So I decided I wanted to do something a bit different. I normally write kind of comedic, light-hearted poems, but love poems aren't really like my bag. That's not my like personal preference. I think there's a lot of beautiful love poetry in the world, and they do not need me coming in and go, hello. That's not necessary, right? So I decided I would try and write something.
Is that how you hit on people?
Not anymore. I'm engaged now.
That's necessary.
Like it worked for her, so don't knock it.
I've never written anyone a love poem, and they are very welcome for that. But yeah, I decided to write something a bit more like spooky, scary. But I also knew that, I mean, you'll see from the sort of tone and stuff, I know that like me being like, yeah, in my voice, I'm gonna come and punch you in the face and or whatever. Like that's not very, you know what I mean? There's only certain ways you can be like threatening. So I just, so I'm trying Mark's thing of doing a threatening.
Ways you can be threatening.
Yeah, I want it. Yeah, so this is my threatening sestina, inspired kind of by Mark's threatening poemness, I suppose. So we'll see how it goes. You can see if you can guess the end words afterwards. Some of them will be very obvious. Silence. You cannot see. All you hear is the drip, drip, drip from the tap. You're sore, shoulders aching from where you were abandoned, crumpled on the floor. I would get used to the nothing, the darkness and the dripping. You're here because you are weak. How long will you be here? How long has it already been? A week, a month, a year? Silence only halting from the breath formed in your throat and the drip, drip, drip from the tap. It won't take long for the noise to wear on your nerves, a grating pattern not sustaining, a sore, a seal. Tell me, when was it the last time you saw anything? All you know are these four walls, that door. You're too weak now to break it down, though I enjoyed watching you try. You had wanted to wear the rock down, but here any sound breaks the silence. Best to stay quiet. A tap on the door has never led to anything good, and I hate to be disturbed. Of course, we'd been keeping an eye on you for quite some time. You're in sore need of real life experience. Consider this your gentle tap into reality. Now you have plenty of time to consider your weakness and misdeeds while it's just you and the dark and the silence. And this is exactly where you will stay. It's where you belong, and I dare say exactly what you deserve. Take this moment. Appreciate the absences of silence. With you here alone, there will be a sore lack of interest in company. In here, days and weeks can pass, nothing but yourself and the tap drips for company. I pity the tap. How does the phrase go again? Where there's a will, there's a way. Good thing you were so weak-willed, or there's a possibility I wouldn't enjoy this so much. I'd say sorry, but I don't like to lie. Enjoy the silence. It may be some weeks just you and the tap and the silence between the drips where you may become the beast I always saw. Thanks.
Yes.
Wow.
Good.
I hope you're all scared.
That's very intense, Bex.
That's terrifying.
Oh. I'm so proud.
Spooky.
So proud.
What
you.
an
Oh, that's-
amazing
yeah.
Sestina. Mark, as the king of threatening poems at I Am
Oh.
Loud. Yeah, comments, feedback.
Oh, very good, very good. I got the real sense of fear and in the not knowing, which is good. You want to give everything away. I admittedly at the start I started trying to guess what words you were doing and then realized I wasn't listening as well to the poem, so I sort of gave
Okay,
up.
fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
So the first couple of stanzas I was like, what am I doing? The lines like, good thing you were not as weak or I wouldn't enjoy this as much. I'm like, yeah, because the enjoyment's what makes it scary. It's good scary. Yeah. Very good, very well.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm like, and your reading of that as well. I'm sure written on on the page. Obviously, it's very obvious what the N words are, but your delivery of that didn't even sound like a Sestina.
Yeah, I did
Sestina
cheat
in the
in
good
as
way.
many ways as
So-
I possibly could find to do it.
I think I caught a couple of things, and I think I've done the same for a few of them. So, but yeah, absolutely, yes.
I think the word choices are good as well. Like I think there's two ways to be scary, right? It's like there's there's sort of boo scary, and then like that sort of dread scary, right?
Yeah.
And so I think in poetry you have to lean into the dread. Sort of my favorite two scary poems I really love. One is obviously from Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, right? And it's like nothing scary happens in that poem. It's all inside the speaker's mind that the horror lingers. And then there's Tall Man's Coat by Lewis Brown,
Yep.
which is a staggeringly terrifying piece. And I put this very much in that vein of it's that hint at the fear, at the terror, never explicitly mentioned, right? It's like anyone that knows anything about horror movies knows never to show the monster,
Never show the monster.
therein lies the fear. And using words like drip and tap, these small, quiet, onomatopoeic words that suggest this sort of deadly silence, because in silence there should be safety, right? Like because you would hear if anything was coming, but as you the listener know something's coming, then the silence becomes a betrayal, right? It becomes like, no, I should hear. And that's where you find that sort of dread and fear. And so I think that's like you've tapped into the real sort of core fundamentals of how you put horror together. I'm a big horror fan, so yeah, like it's really
the thing is, I am not a big horror fan. I am incredibly squeamish. I don't like being jump scared or anything like that. But like, because I just don't really like gore and blood and whatever. But like this like kind of more psychological, fucked upness of stuff is always interesting. And when I wrote it, I listened to like a tap dripping sound effect for the entire time, and I'm a little bit crazier now than I was before, but it helped me, like, because I find it really easy to write rhythmically in poetry, and the point of a tap drip is it's not rhythmic, so then the poem couldn't really be rhythmic, and then it's more of a monologue, but it's a sestina, so
I think when you look at writing technique, like a very easy lesson to learn about tension, they'll give you an example, right? If you want a cool moment, have a meeting going on in a boardroom and suddenly a huge explosion destroys the whole room. That's very intense. But if you show a meeting starting and then you show a zoom cut of, like a bomb ticking under the table, and then you go back to the conversation and they slowly like continue to converse. It's like in Inglourious Bastards with Quentin Tarantino. They show you the people hiding under the floorboards before Christoph Waltz arrives. And it's, that scene, all that tension, all that casual conversation only works because they're under the floorboards. Yeah, I think it's when you get fundamental writing technique that is able to be used with film or TV or anything like that, and you see it so effectively used in something as condensed and streamlined as a poem. I really enjoy that.
Thanks, such a brilliant piece. Yeah, it's interesting too, Bex. And Mark, one of the things that you were saying was that listening for the end words sort of distracted you from hearing the poem. And it's funny because so many of these forms, are almost like you can listen to them either as whole poems, or you can listen to them like puzzles trying to figure out how the form works within it. And it's interesting because I think with yours, Bex, there's some, like Kev mentioned, drip and tap, you know, sort of immediately jump out. And interestingly, I used some similar words to you. I think here we both used.
So my end words were silence, tap, saw, where, I, and weak. So I chose a lot of words that you could be like, yeah. So I got a lot of words that were like.
Wait, so drip isn't one of your end words?
I thought drip was one. Yeah.
No, so I managed to use the I in drip to be the I as the I end word in one of mine. But yeah, it's not an end. Yeah, it's not. No, drip's not an end word. It's just a running theme.
But that is fascinating. And I think it shows one of the great things about sestinas is, yes, you have this restriction of needing to repeat certain words, but that doesn't mean that you can't repeat other words.
Paul Casey's one is a good example of like, he has that kind of, you know, doing whatever down the A1, doing a speed, not whatever,
doing whatever,
like doing 70 down the A1 isn't, you know, that's a added form choice on top of the sestina. It's a good point that we haven't really covered, that like, you know, we look at these forms as very separate things, but then you can overlap. You know, I mean, you can, maybe not all of them, you couldn't necessarily do a sestina that is also a sonnet, but like you could certainly make a concrete sestina, or you can add elements of univocalism into parts or whatever, or you know, if you were looking at wider forms, I know we've restricted to 5, but you know, you could pull in lots of different elements to, and that's where spoken word sits in the sweet spot, right? That in free form writing, just like in free form swimming, it doesn't mean you're not using technique. It just means you can use whichever technique you want when you want to, and that's fine. So it's worth remembering.
Bex, I'm curious, in terms of those end words, did you choose them before you started writing, or did you start writing and then select them?
So I picked, I had a list of sort of like 8 to 10 words that I kind of were considering. And what I did was I picked sort of 3 that I knew could be used like quite diversely. So like where and weak and saw, I was like, okay, so these can kind of be used as like, you know, saw and weak and whatever, you know. And then I wanted to create a narrative around something. And I said, was like, okay, well, whatever narrative I pick, that will be one of my end words. Like whatever the kind of main scary thing is, will be it. And I wanted as well to try my best to like avoid kind of gendering anything. Like it's any like a man or a woman or like a non-binary person or whatever could read this to any other person as like, I mean, please don't use my work to actually like torture people. If you want to do that, come to our Fringe show and I'll torture you for free with my poetry. But like, you know what I mean? It was like, it's kind of, it makes it scarier because you as a reader could be either voice in that situation, and you could be in either position, and just keep it kind of broad. That's not what you asked me. You asked about end lines, but I went on a tangent. You're welcome.
No, it's all good. I think it's so interesting because there are so many different ways of getting into a sestina, whether you start writing and then pick your words, or sort of, there are many approaches into it. Let's move on. Thank you so much, Bex. That was an incredible piece. I'm going to have serious nightmares now, so thank you for that. Let's move on to Mark. Mark, so you were saying that you actually kind of enjoyed the challenge, or at least didn't find it as horrific as anticipated.
So I do, so in terms of writing it, I definitely had, excuse me, a bit of an easier, or at least I felt an easier time with this one. I guess not have it like, being able to choose the end words and being able to choose their ease of fitting into this form definitely helped more than sort of like the golden shovel element did. I did say it was easier. I did not necessarily say that my poem was like uplifting in any way. And so it was at the start where you were talking about our journey through April and into poetry, and I couldn't help but laugh because mine kind of follows a narrative of a journey. I found, definitely like you being able to like pick the end words and do, because you said I picked the words first, had an idea of the narrative, and then sort of wrote through. And I'd been when I'd been sort of like listening to this and stuff like that, I'd been listening to sort of a particular song that I'd been singing and humming along. And I was like, with sestinas, with having like repeated end words like 6 times, I was like, okay, well, what? I was trying to think of a way to get over my hatred of reusing words. And so I was like, well, I mean, this lends itself to a bit of a refrain, kinda. And so like, I didn't use like a single refrain for like one line is not always the same across all of them. But I do have a bit where one of the end words has a few words that lead into it, if you see what I mean. So it's the end word is correct, but it's got a thing into it as well. But yeah, I was like, I was following it along. I wanted to kind of do a more narrative thing because that's how they kind of went with it. I never mean for my stuff. I feel I always start my poems in quite a happy mode. And then at some point, I obviously, because I start to move on. Maybe I get ideas that I go, save that for later, this bit, if I have a rough idea. But at some point, I imagine when it gets, initially difficult, that first half an hour afterwards, and I go, oh, right. Despair.
The inevitable despair of poetry.
The inevitable despair.
Did I ever tell you once, Mark, I was writing I was going to write a poem for my sister's wedding, and I was like, I had a great idea. I was like, oh, I'll write the first half of like all the sort of bad things, like my hostile feelings towards marriage and commitment and whatnot, and then at like the halfway point, I'll flip it and be like, but you guys show me this. And I wrote all the first half like, piece of piss, no problem. And then I got to the turn and was like, nah, I got nothing. So I just did I Want instead.
It's like the Tim Minchin song Kant, right? I meant the bit at the start. He
just
had to say a bunch of things he didn't like about certain groups of people and then filling in the bit. I'm going, oh, how am I going to make this fit now? Like coming up with the... So I don't know. I don't think this one is like is finished. I would probably want to tweak this one a bit here and there. But I'll tell you the sort of the weird story afterwards after I've read it. So it doesn't have a title because I'm rubbish at titles. They're only ever jokes for me 90% of the time. This was a good decision. I can read and write whatever I want this way, delve deep into anything that can pique my interest long enough to hold my attention. Where the story goes, where I go, everywhere. I see fireflies dance for the moon, hear the wave-breaking melodies of the seas. Not a bad life to live by. But there isn't a day goes by, I don't wonder if I made the right call. It isn't all starry nights and crystal clear seas. It can be cold and lonely sometimes. But today I crossed the peak, made it through, and as angry clouds brew, I see firelights of civilization, a place to sleep and sell my wares. The first question of any new place, where do I go second? Inns, food, and baths pass me by. The women here are beautiful and strong. I see fire in their eyes as they reject me left and right. I have been traveling weeks, probably reek. Still, I steal the odd peek. It's just nice to see faces again. But maybe, let's see what tomorrow sees. I wish I could say I awoke in bliss, ready to seize the day, picked out something wonderful to wear, spun sweet songs to patrons and watched profits peak, but no. Consciousness came by the noise first, then the smell, then screaming voices right outside and beyond. I see fire. I see fire burning the trees, the buildings, salamander sites set to seize this settlement, to melt it right off the maps, leaving nothing but a message. Where once there was mercy, no longer. A graveyard of ash buried by the shadow of this lonely mountain peak. I try to escape. Sprint to shelter, peek around every corner as desolation comes upon the sky. I see fire liquefy the bakery I wanted to buy from and the surrounding streets. All anyone sees in every direction is ruin. Nowhere left to run. All I wanted to do was write. It's hard to breathe as the heat reaches peak, hot enough to melt the sea. I see fire. Smoke coats the sky. It's everywhere. In place of goodbye, please let this warning be my last right. Boom.
Wow.
You did a Hobbit poem.
Now, I didn't realize I'd done a Hobbit poem until...
Wait, that's
Right.
purposeful.
No. So the song...
Lonely Mountain, Desolation.
Literally
Actually,
Ed Sheeran's I See Fire.
Yes.
So
Come
the
on
song
now.
I See Fire did not realize was by Ed Sheeran. I discovered that song as like a cover through a Dungeons and Dragons
Oh
playlist.
my god, of course.
So I
It
had
was very
no
Dungeons
idea.
and Dragons.
I just thought it was
yeah.
very Dungeons and Dragons. I was like,
Oh
well, the
my
Hobbit and all this stuff meets
God.
around it. It wasn't until I was checking some of the lyrics because I wanted to include like desolation comes upon the sky. I was like, Ed Sheeran, nah, no.
That's amazing.
Because I'd just been writing it about generic bad fire that was always going to leave it kind of vague.
I love
This
that
poem
though.
is forever your Ed Sheeran tribute poem.
I know.
I know. I love this poem. Don't. Yeah.
I love Ed
oh my
Sheeran.
God.
I'm not even being.
Oh, that's true. That's
Yeah.
fair.
So I mean, not to not give credit to Ed Sheeran, but it wasn't his version I liked. So no, like, well, I'm sure it's fine, but like, but I didn't realize it was even about The Hobbit, and The Hobbit's like my favorite books, the first book I ever read. So it was like fun for that coming back and realizing the fire, the thing I was talking about. I was like, huh, I didn't even make it a dragon. They did. So, so I was like, that's good fun. But
That's
yeah,
amazing though.
So the end words, some sort of obviously the easier ones, but yeah, like right, peak, where, fire, seize, and buy. Because fire is the only one that obviously goes with the refrain, but the rest of them, had a bunch of good thingies or a bunch of more useful ones, and so they were the ones I came up with. Or what
Your use of seize for the day is very genius, by the way. I clocked that and was like, oh yes.
The website that was
So
in that Katie had linked in the workshop I had found from just going looking for homophones without using it. I was just listening on one screen, Googling on the other. But that one I quite liked, like the idea of seize, and there was a lot of that bit where like the words of it kind of was like, oh, seize, and like arms was another one that was quite good, and like bow and bow and stuff like that. I was like, I just kind of, I don't know why. Maybe it's just me hearing what I want to hear, but I just hear like all like
pirates.
that fantasy pirates, that wonderful reality of things I like. And I'm like,
I find it so fascinating your style, Mark, because like I think with Katie's research and stuff like that, we talk a lot about, and I think there is a kind of standard of confessional, semi-biographical, kind of like authentic poetry that exists, right? And that's what most people assume. I don't think it's maybe as prominent as it was even when Kate started developing her research. I think there's been a more sort of push to third person voice and all that kind of stuff. But Mark, you've always done that. Like there's a Viking poem you have that is just crazy thematic. Like when you swing into these kind of like big narrative fantasy concept things, it really works well. Like even your Pokemon stuff is a good early example of where you would take that, and it makes things like weight, the abnormality. Like when I think of your style now, I think of like Speedboat and Four Horsemen and like
I love
the
Speedboat.
Viking poem and stuff, like these sort of like weird narrative pieces. And it's such a strength to be able to do it both comedically and kind of sincerely and make what is there a really narrative piece that I'm also a big fan of kind of using poetry to like do what people do with film and other forms of writing and stuff, which is explore the things you already enjoy. And like you've done that kind of consistently through this. We look back at the concrete thing with where you got to like look at anime and stuff. And I know I have dabbled in the past with I did a version of Reservoir Dogs as a kind of kid's bedtime story. And I love doing things like that where you have to worry less about the specific narrative, but laying it into a new format. And I think it was a really smart choice to do that for Sestina, to just go, well, I'll just pick words, like, okay, I'm using that song as the basis, so I'll take some of the key words, and like, find a way to layer that in. Super smart choice.
Oh, thank you. But again, as I say, it comes back to the chat we had about Golden Shovel. As I can't say whether I would have thought about using this or not. I probably because I did have worries that I was like, You know that worry when you're using something's inspiration, you're like, am I being lazy? Is that like, how is it's going to come across? And I know that that's, you know, like obviously,
No, you're being smart.
you steal, you reinvest, you homage, you inspire and stuff. But
You
yeah,
have
it
made
was
fundamental change to that, Pete. You know what I mean? You wouldn't like other than
Well, Ed
some
Sheeran's song
key
was
refrain
inspired
lines.
by The Hobbit, so like, it's
oh yeah,
fine.
this is where I went. Well, it's like it's loosely based on a song that's loosely based on a film that's loosely based on the book. So
And those books that, you know, Tolkien did not create all of the ideas present within Lord of the Rings. Like, you know, a lot of those creature archetypes and stuff existed out with his work.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going around. But yeah, that's the thing, because I'm laughing because it's just a dude going on a journey. And when you said that, I went, oh, there's so many parallels. Sorry.
No, I think it's a real strength of it, Mark, because obviously, you know, we spotlight the video of the poet who's reading, so that the people who are watching, you know, focus on them and they don't see our reactions. But Mark, I don't know if you saw during your poem, I was like, oh, this is a lovely poem. I'm really enjoying it. And then, you know, you got to desolation and I see fire a bunch, and I just went, yes, the Hobbit.
Yep.
I got very
I saw you
excited.
move when I said lonely mountain peak, because
Yeah.
I did deliberately add that one in. I was like, people that know will know. Other people will be like, oh, that's a nice descriptive. But
I think though, ultimately, you know, it didn't feel like a rewrite of The Hobbit. You know, you're not just taking the perspective of the main character in that scene. You know, you're not talking about dwarves, you're not talking about Smaug. You know, you are inhabiting a different perspective, and so it didn't feel derivative in that sort of negative sense. You know, it felt like a built upon thing, and particularly because you're then using the Sestina form. And I think it's one thing that's really valuable when we are telling stories from different perspectives, right? It's what do you add? What how is your expansion an addition to that sort of canon? And it's been one of my favorite things throughout this project. You know, we have touched on a lot of different pop culture figures and historical figures. You know, Bex has written about Anne Boleyn. I did some writing about Captain America. You know, Kev's written about professional wrestlers and various things. So
don't focus on Lasco K. Focus on my obsession with men in spandex.
much more interesting, right?
Just as long as we don't bring up my fiery republicanism again, huh?
Yeah, I was going to leave that in the past.
Like the monarchy should be.
Oh my god.
In any case, I think the poetic form is such an interesting way of exploring all of these different characters and sort of expanding upon them. Yeah.
Can I just say one more thing on Mars? Because I like, because, you know, not to just do constant compliments, and it's not a negative,
please
but
don't,
because you mentioned beforehand that you were kind of, and I write the same, I get taken by the poem and see where I end up. And so I think it is noticeable that the first half, I was getting a more kind of like, oh, this is going to be a weird Mark whimsical explorer going to the North Pole kind of vibe. And then I felt, oh, this is very Hobbit-y. And it would be interesting to see, and not like starkly, this is a nitpick. It would be interesting to see if you went back and redeveloped the opening couple stanzas to see if knowing where you're going smooths that transition a bit.
Yeah, actually, and like I said, this is one I wish I'd had more time on. Not a timeline or a deadline, but just more time, just to go back and do those bits. But yeah, because the first half was was quite easy to write, and then I got to the how do I do the bit, because I hadn't really, the bit I'd thought about and the bit I had a narrative was the majority of was the lines to then be written. I was like, all right, so he gets just a merchant dude that was unlucky to show up that day, right? Like. But yes, thank you. I will ponder this more. Thank
Very
you,
nice
guys.
stuff.
Thank you. It's too kind.
So-
Stop compliments now.
Happily, Mark, you're terrible. So Kevin, it is your turn to share your glorious work. I'm very excited. Talk us through it.
So I wish I hadn't gone last. I don't know. It was I had an interesting week with this week with it, where I was like, I don't know. I go through spells where if I can write, I write very quickly. like I do a lot of consideration and then I go, cool, fire through this, bap, 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 bap. And maybe it doesn't always work out the best, but like, you know, I can go back and tweak and all that stuff. Most of the other poems, like while I had done a lot of research or thought or, you know, sort of groundwork, I wrote them in, you know, 4 or 5 hours, right? Like 3 to 5 hours is my kind of usual period for the previous 3 we've done. And this week I knew I couldn't do that with Sestina, so I kind of kept sitting down to write and hitting an absolute roadblock. It was really, really bad. Like, and everyone who does anything remotely creative knows that there are inexplicable times where you can try and try and try and nothing happens. And it was kind of compounded the irritation by being the fact that I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do what I had discussed last week on the podcast and flesh out the kind of sonnet idea I had of like talking about wrestling and that kind of, you know, nature of is it hurting individuals for our entertainment and is that healthy? But I couldn't do anything. And while last night I assured Kate at around midnight when she went to bed that it was okay because I had most of it done, I hadn't written anything. And so I started writing very panically at about 1 a.m. last night. And managed to write something and then woke up at around 9. For those that don't know, we record this around midday. So I woke up at like 9 and checked it and went, okay, guess that's it. So it's not very good.
Are you pulling the here's one I wrote on the way here?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But I don't know, like, because I think it's good to be, because I was just going to be like, oh yeah, I wrote this and it's about this, but I wanted to mention it just because like it happens. And I know there will be people who have intended to do NaPoWriMo maybe every day. I have not written every day. I know we've been saying that's the kind of idea. I have done work towards my poems every day. You know, I've thought about them. I've done research. I've looked at other poems. I've read on the formats or done a workshop or whatever, but I haven't written every day. And I didn't write anything up until literally this morning, you know, early hours. So it's just to be like, if that's the case, don't do it. Don't sit up till a stupid time. I'm only doing that because we all, you know, like between us, we make a commitment and we want to do this show and it works in a certain format. But like, if you're stressed, know that everybody hits it. We're not effortlessly putting together poems and stuff like that. And if it's not something good, that's fine, or you don't consider it good, there will be worse. And I'm sure all my friends will still say lovely things about it. So it is what it is. But like, yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So the way I eventually kind of settled on it was I just went, pick 6 words that you associate with wrestling or that you think would be contrasting to what other people would think of wrestling. So I picked those 6 words. So either, you know, the words that either really fit it or didn't fit it at all, and so therefore fit it. There's a kind of weird thing about wrestling of like, it's a dance, it's a, you know, whatever. And so I just chose those words and I did my envoy. I did the last line and then a line to get me there and then a leave off line to start the envoy. And those became the first 3 words. And then I was just like, cool, well, I'll figure out when I first use any of the next 3 words, and then that will be the order. So I jumped from the envoy back to the first stanza and just started writing. So that was my kind of technique for it. This doesn't have a name because it didn't exist. So wrestling Sestina. Sport meets art in the heartbreak. Pain poured onto canvas ring, a beautiful and bloody dance, made no less stunning by its seeming lack of truth. Competition and camaraderie turned twin, but where do wrestlers get the drive to bump and feed and sleep and bump and feed and drive to towns without time or distance or daybreak? What sort of win could make that worth enduring? There must be some truth unseen in this dance, but they will tell you there is no dance as they backflip and pile drive, seeing suspension of disbelief as something separate to a lack of truth. They will do anything not to let that bubble break, to keep you cheering. to win. Behavior reaching Darwin Award-worthy status, ignoring evolved danger avoidance and instead favoring any chance to drive without a brake. To walk the wire with no net is what turns the trick into truth. What is the obsession with truth? Is a hero's story ruined because we know they'll win? Would it really break the flow of the dance so much we fans would rather drive a mind to fracturing? And are their mouths already watering at the prospect of crowds returning, truthfully concerning that the drive to win in front of fans in abundance could lead to hurting unnoticed? As we finally break into applause, would it feel like a real win? Here at the end of the dance, with nothing left to break.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's so
we're all gonna
annoying,
keep
Kev.
complimenting it.
No idea.
really
I didn't
so
read that very
irritating.
well at all either. That's because I literally have just looked at it this morning. Apologies. Yeah.
Well, but before getting on sort of like the self-deprecation train, I do think, first of all, like, thank you for for sharing, you know, the process that went into that, because I think it's really valuable, particularly, you know, we get on the show with a lot of humor and genuinely do enjoy it, but it is a huge amount of work to put together these poems. And I think it's really important not to sort of erase that creative struggle and that hard work. But genuinely, that is an incredibly powerful piece, and really well written. And I know, probably, you know, knowing you, you're going to want to revisit it and you know, work on performance and all of that. But really
I think I
well
could find a
done.
better flow. But like, one of the things that, again, it drove me mad about the Sestina, and I'm so impressed by Mark's piece because he managed to find like an internal rhythm, like a rhyme in it, like, and I couldn't conjure any of that internal rhyme or assonance, and it just, you know, I think probably because I was freaking out and hadn't left and I just wanted to power through it, and so there are some nice lines or bits that I think work, but like, it's missing for me a key aspect of my work, which is that kind of rhythm and pace and stuff. And like, I wish I had maybe done more what Bex and Mark both did, which is maybe have take on like a personified voice of a wrestler or like of an audience member, or like tell a specific story of a match or something, rather than like this kind of continuance from the sonnet, which was more of a kind of disembodied conversation. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult when you're having to write in a form that you're not used to, and also within that like restricted time frame. We've all had it in different weeks of this, like, we've all been pretty open about how terrible sometimes it's been to write poems, and like that happens for like literally everyone, as you were saying, in whatever creative industry. You're always going to have that kind of block, and it's always the first thing that you write out of the block is always going to be judged a lot more critically than other stuff that you might write, because you're holding yourself to a higher standard, and like you want to make sure that it's, you know, do you want to force yourself out through the block, get through it, and then start making great things again. So I think you'll always be a bit more sort of deprecating and critical of works that you do when you've been having like a hard time writing, than you might be sort of under normal occasions.
Yeah, because you feel it's limited by the block. You feel like, oh well, that's the best I could get despite my inability, and so you're like, that's the
yeah. But you've been on this, like, go on the struggle bus, and if you make something before you get off the bus, then that's something that you have like then new framework to work from. Ultimately, you know, while a poem, you might write a poem and then it changes 40 different times before, you know, and turn into many different poems over the years. So even if it's like, this is finished now because you're performing it, we all might take different elements from our own poems into different things, and the style and the words you're using and the form and whatever will be stuff that you can replicate because you've had the experience to learn from it. And failures, not that your poem is a failure, I thought it was really good, you're just very self-deprecating, but like failures like are just as valuable for our learning experiences as successes are. Profound.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mark, any thoughts on Kev's?
Yeah, well, no, I was gonna say, because I mean, first off, yeah, like before we get on the deprecation train, yeah, it's a hard thing. Sometimes the blocks just happen, as well. And I think as well as that, I think you've been quite good as well, because you knew you wanted to go into it with wrestling in your mind. And I wonder how much that's like not been part of the block, because those blocks just happen even when it's a thing. And especially when it's a thing that you're obviously very passionate about. For what it's worth, even though you've sort of told us, I think your poem absolutely gets across the message you want to portray. And I think it does do it in a very beautiful way as well. You can tell it's like, you can listen to it and tell not the amount of time that you put into it, but you can tell it's newer to you, because you always again have a confidence in your voice when you're like happier with a poem.
All my other ones I read, kind of consistently before we did the podcast, because it's you want to dust it off.
Yeah. So getting this in the same way as you said from me, I would like to see that given a week to breathe, and you even going back to that poem. You mentioned Wait earlier on. When that was first written, I was getting you to look at it, and the version of Wait that then came out was entirely different than what it was before. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you gain, it's the panning for gold that's getting good stuff from that. So I mean,
just to give as well, I should give you guys the 6 words.
Oh yes.
So my 6 words were break, ring, dance, truth, win, and drive. And so there was a nice thing of being able to kind of make win into twin, or ring into enduring, dance into avoidance, ring into cheering and favoring, fracturing, watering, dance into abundance.
I've had a really hard time. Anyway, here's this poem I wrote today, and all the fancy ways I've used my amazing end words that I picked, and all the versatility that I did. But it's really bad, guys. So
honestly, that was so it was only because I didn't even think about my words being flexible, and it wasn't until I was like, oh my god, ring is the end of all these words. That is so helpful that I was really pleased. So I was like, yeah, that was, and it was struggling to continue to use the word dance, and Googled words ending dance.
Google is
very
your
helpful.
friend. Yep. Google and Rhyming Dictionary are really
rhymezone.com.
Yep, a poet's best friend.
Yeah, so there is stuff of worth there, and that's why I said before 100%. The thing, even if you're not 100% satisfied with a thing or whatever, you will always find there's always worth in it. So
good job, buddy.
Yeah, awesome work. And I think a really valuable reminder as well, the point of NaPoWriMo is just to spark your creativity, is to get you writing and get you engaged with these creative ideas, right? It doesn't matter. It's not about finishing. It's about starting, and it's about trying out new ideas and experimenting with all of that. So if you are writing alongside us throughout NaPoWriMo, first of all, awesome work for making it this far. And secondly, remember that the journey doesn't stop in May. May can be one of the most valuable months just for looking back and reflecting, and, as Mark said, giving your poems some time to breathe and then revisiting them. We're needing to move on due to time, but thank you so much, Kev and Mark and Bex, you guys, for sharing your amazing work. I think those were some incredibly strong sestinas.
If you haven't seen Katie's Sestina, go to the YouTube.
Oh yeah,
just before you move on, because it is also
annoyingly good. It's really infuriating.
We'll put a link to mine below. It's about dancing. So that's fun. But yeah, we're gonna close this chapter on sestinas and get ready to open a chapter on univocal poetry. Kev, we are going back to the beginning of our journey, and Kev is bookending it. So he will be hosting next week. Kev, can you explain for our beautiful audience what a univocal poem is?
You only get one vowel.
Yep.
It's definitely the easiest form.
Exactly what it is.
It is literally what it is.
Yeah, write a poem using only one vowel. So A, E, I, O, or U. We are flexible about the Y. We're saying it's okay to use Y. We've got some brilliant examples on the channel. So Courtney Stoddard and Joe Gilbert wrote univocal poems for our Return to Form project. We will put a link below. They're incredible. They're written in E, so definitely do check those out. And as is tradition, we're going to end this episode with another example of a univocal poem from one of our absolute favorite poets and just humans in the world, the amazing Dan Simpson. Dan is a London-based poet. He is one of the most, I think, formally experimental poets that I know. He really pushes himself to play with different forms and to try new things. He has several books out. We will put links below to all of those. Bunch of different shows. Of links. Yeah, bunch of different projects. He runs Experimental Words with Dr. Sam Illingworth, which we had the pleasure of participating in several years ago. But just all around great guy. And he has an amazing univocal poem called Dad's Black Cab, which is a univocal in A, and I'm going to try to do justice to it here. So yeah, Dan Simpson, Dad's Black Cab. Dad's a black cab man, grafts hard all day, all warm chat and charm, a canny bard that gladly attacks cab ranks. All want a cab, smart bar staff, sparkly gymnasts, daft granddads, brassy grandmas, sarky yanks, blah, 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 lanky stags, lads, lads, lads. A hand sharply flags, a flat palm prays skywards. A brash man calls hymnals, halt, cab. Dad parks. Canary Wharf? Dad's a pathway analyst, starts a sly atlas maths, charts all maps, tracks back many yards. Gnarls at St. Pancras. Bypass Pall Mall and Strand, fly by Aldwych and Bank, anarchy at Trafalgar, V&A, RADA, data rhythms sync, stand by, a plan. Dad says, away! Dad plays a part, talks backwards, chatty. Shh, says man, angry as hand taps flatly at smart pad, snarls at call, blasts talk back. What an ass, Dad says dryly. Dad plays Adamant, ABBA, AHA, AC/DC, Alt-J, Frank Zappa, Alabama 3, as cars blast past. Abracadabra, cab parks at Canary Wharf. A grand, Dad says, a gag. Man says, nah, at that, and can't pay. Man ran away. Crafty bastard, Dad gasps and gurrs. A black cab hazard. Dad adapts. Day crawls past. And dark. Back at flat, Dad yawns, warm snacks, TV, a G&T, and at last, Dad naps. So that was...
Dan always reads that about twice the pace. That's insane.
Like it's incredibly hard to read.
It's nice to hear like that because it makes it impressive when you think of seeing Dan perform it. And he's like, da, 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 da. It's crazy.
But yeah, massive thanks to Dan Simpson. Please do check out his work. We have put links below. He runs workshops and various other things and is just one of the kindest and most lovely and creative people you could ever hope to meet. So just briefly going around, how is everyone feeling? Bex, how are you feeling about Univocal Week?
I'm glad it's the last one. I'm feeling good. Gonna write Mona. So I don't know what there's a technical name for it, but I can't remember what it is. I'm gonna write with one vowel.
Technically. But yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Kev, how are you feeling?
Tired.
Makes sense.
Very sleepy.
Then ooh, nice. You can start a poem with that.
Concerned because my plan had been to get Sestina bashed out the way so I could start my univocal because I have to release a video of one on Thursday.
Oh yeah, good luck. Can't wait to see. It's gonna be great.
Mark, you feeling good?
I can't promise much, but I can promise it'll be short.
We should point out that Mark has already written a univocal poem, which is what, 6 pages long?
6 pages long, so it will be shorter than...
So we're not going to see a repeat performance of the lengthy...
We don't have enough time on the podcast for 6 pages of
No.
my...
This is true.
No, it's not enough. So it'll be this small.
If you'd like it as a
Personally-
lovely Christmas present, let us know and we'll wrap it up with a little bow under your tree for you.
It would not make a good Christmas present.
Oh, we will not wrap it up. If you want a Christmas present for an enemy, we will wrap it up with a little bow.
Not uplifting, but impressive was the review my mother gave it. So...
That's classic Mark. Yeah, personally, I'm just grateful that Helen of Troy is not a univocal phrase. So can't do that. Oh, well.
Helen is, though.
Shush.
You can do a poem. The of Troy part is very important. I've got an anti-Helen. No one's writing. You know what I mean? Like,
Maybe I'll write an ode to your Auntie Helen. That'd be good.
if you're still watching at this point, thank you for just enduring.
Yep.
So with that, we are going to wrap up. Yeah, if you have gotten to this point, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that your writing is going well. As I was saying before, please do follow us on social media for all sorts of tips and tricks and resources. We have tons of poems and examples on this channel, as well as full workshops, which are hopefully going to be helpful to you. If you have the resources to spare, putting this together does take quite a lot of work and time. So we do have a Patreon. It's linked below. It would mean the world to us if you supported us there. It enables us to continue doing this work and supporting the rest of the Scottish spoken word scene and beyond. So thank you all so much. And with that, we will bid you a very fond adieu. And looking forward to univocals. Everyone, please say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Sleep. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you could hit the like button, if you could hit the subscribe button, and make sure to ring that bell icon so you don't miss any updates from us in the future. If you want to go that extra mile and support us a little further, we do have a Patreon channel with loads of exclusive goodies, and you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. We appreciate your help, guys, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.